Hi, I'm Niven Neyland, and I've been in prison. And because of that, I got involved with Prison Fellowship many years ago. And it's a wonderful organisation. Well, initially when I was introduced to Prison Fellowship, I was in Pentridge Prison, which doesn't function now as a prison. And I was just in one of the yards, and it was my first time in prison, well, my only time in prison, thank goodness. And I'm just standing there, and you're very aware in prison of your surroundings, particularly those who are coming close to you. And this bloke walks up, and he was a lovely guy, but he came up and he was asking me questions like a social worker. And I thought, well, I don't know who you are, and I don't know why you have so much freedom in the prison, but I'm not interested. I brushed him off, and I said, because he said, are you okay? Do you want some help, or do you want to just ask him questions? I said, no, mate, I'm right. And I just brushed him off, and I felt bad about that later on. So, and then when I'd done my time in Pentridge Prison, I ended up going up to a prison farm, which is soon to be closed, Durrangile, up near Shepparton. And Prison Fellowship were visiting there as well. So I came to know a lot about Prison Fellowship then, not only through one of the visitors whose name was Ted O'Brien, and a lovely old bloke. Well, he wasn't that old, he's a little bit older than me, but he was a good guy. But and another person that I was in with, and he'd done quite a few years, and he was a Christian, and same as myself, and anyhow, he was telling me he knew a bit about Prison Fellowship, and he knew Reg Worthy, the state director at that time, and so he was telling me about all the wonders and all the greatness and all the things Prison Fellowship were doing at that time. So I learned a lot, and I ended up developing a good relationship with him and a good relationship with Ted O'Brien. And we met every Friday at about 3 o'clock. He would come in and go for a wander through the prison and talk to people, and we'd end up having a Bible study, which was terrific, really. So, and then when I got out, my friend that was in there, he said, listen, make sure you go and see Reg and sign up with Prison Fellowship to do some work, because I was running Bible studies in there, and I was doing lots of good work, I suppose you'd call it. And so I got out and I went to Reg and I said, listen, I've been doing all this stuff. And I went to an orientation day and I said, look, I've been doing a lot of stuff in prison, helping guys and all that sort of stuff. I might be useful to your organisation. And he grabbed me on the shoulder. Just come over here, son. And he took me over to the corner of the room. This was an orientation day, so there were lots of people there. And he came out, singled me out, wandered me over to a corner, and he said, listen, he said, I'll tell you what, why don't you go home and be a father and a husband, work and do those things, and if in 12 months that same fire is in your belly, you come and see me. And it was really, they were words of wisdom, because the fire wasn't there. It was just a temporary flame. And to me, and I've thought on that for years and years, how he had the wisdom to figure that out. And so I came back probably 5 years later and tried again. Once my family was established, because I was fresh out of prison, once the family's established, my child is growing, I'm at work, I've established myself there again, and I'm throwing some money back in the bank and doing all those things you need to do. And so I went back to Reg, and I signed up with Prison Fellowship then as a whatever they wanted for me, and that turned out to be a number of things. So I ended up They were running a course called Lives in Transition, which went for 12 weeks. It was a 12-week course, and they were running it at that time in Barwon Prison. And there was a guy running the character first component, right? So it had these various components. It talks about men's health, it talks about mental health, and a whole lot of series, how to write a resume, how to go for a job. It was a really functional course and taught them a lot. And so in this course, we would screen them, and they would have a look at the course and see whether they wanted to do it. Because it was a commitment. It was 4 days a week for 12 weeks. So it was a huge commitment, particularly on prison fellowships side. And it was a lot to juggle, especially getting speakers in. So anyhow, I signed up for that because I was doing character studies at home to basically raise our family on. And and I knew the guy who was delivering the character component, the character first component in prison on that course, and he had enough after about 12 months, so he was busier than I was, so he thought. So anyhow, he handed it over to me and said, "What about you?" And I said, "Okay, look, I'll do it." I put my hand up, and so anyhow, I ended up running that, and that was really exciting because there are two sides to character. There's obviously your good character and your bad character. Like there's discipline, and there's just the other side, which is just being slack. And so there's all these character components about commitment and things like that I would bring in, and I would bring in a raft of them first, and I'd get these guys to select which ones I'd like to talk about, and they'd get the chance to do 8. And they'd pick out these sorts of things, and as we went through them, you could see the light door, like it was quite amazing, because some of these, it was almost like you've got 15 blokes sitting in a room, and you could see illumination just in certain weeks, and these guys would go, "Oh, that's why I'm like I am, right? I can stop this." And it was really encouraging from my perspective. And the other good thing was that at the end of the 8 weeks, we'd like bore down into these character qualities, and then at the end of the 8 weeks, I would have a nice little certificate for them based on the character quality I thought each individual might carry, might be significant in their lives, so at the end of that, we'd have like the media was there, and the certain parts of the media, and and the governor of the prison was there, or the general manager, as they're called there, and we'd have this handing over of these certificates, not only the certificate of Lives in Transition, but these certificates of Character First, which was fantastic. And there was one guy there who I still keep in contact with, and he had, and I gave him a certificate for determination. I ended up mentoring this guy, and he had this certificate for years. And he was only telling my wife, he rang the other day, like when I say that, I mean 6 months ago or so, and and he said, "I still have that certificate, and it's still one of the greatest things that I've got." And anyhow, that was that. So it was really interesting. So that's basically how I got involved. And then they changed. I did a bit of that in Port Phillip Prison. And then they changed the 12-week course. They shrunk it down to change on the inside, which is what we have now. And they've taken parts of that, just components of that, shrunk it down, and now it's a punchy little course. And I did that for a little while in Port Phillip Prison, and I write to prisoners. And
that way.
That's for blokes. I don't think it's what you think it's going to be, actually, because there's a lot of pressure to, like, it's important. I think it's primarily important to get a job. A job solves all sorts of problems, right? And money is probably the biggest. Just paying rent, and we were renting when I got out, because when I went in, things fell apart, and not with the family, but with the rest of the life. And so when I got out, I'd already arranged a job, and I think that's really important too. If you can get someone there, like if you're a trusted person, and sadly not every inmate is trusted, even to their own mates. And so if they say, can you get me a job? Well, the next question would be, well, how long are you going to be there, mate? And so, but I was trusted by my mates. This guy got me a job, and so I was back into the swing of things fairly quickly. We took a month off just to go on a holiday, and a cheap one, and very cheap. And anyhow, and so I went back to work, but it was interesting coming back into the family, because the husband is the king of the family, sort of thing, right? So he thinks, and so when I left, that was sort of my position, the wife and I were on a level, but anyhow, when I came back, she had been the king of the family for all that time, and it wasn't just easy for me to slot back into any positions, and so that was really interesting to see the dynamics of that change, and that took some time to just modify and change, and a whole new life emerged out of that. So support is just vital. Whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian. I was a backslidden Christian when I went into prison, and that was the reason why I went into prison. And I had a few beers, drove a car. My brother died in a car accident that I caused, and from then on, a ball or a wheel, let's say, started rolling and didn't stop for many years. And so about 14 months after that incident, I went to prison. And but I'd also repented, apologised to the Lord, and got some righteous action into my life. And anyhow, it was that helped me enormously, because a couple of weeks after I got into Pentridge, I got my wife to bring a little New Testament. It was a little special one I had at home, and I said, bring that in. I needed at least a couple of weeks to figure out if it's going to get stolen or not. I know it's a Bible, not many would get stolen, but you can use the rice paper for smokes and things like that. And so anyhow, I was quite comfortable. After a couple of weeks, I got a little New Testament brought to me, and I felt the comfort of the Lord immediately. Not that he wasn't with me, and but just reading scripture was wonderful. And from then on, I ended up doing Bible studies. When I got into Durrangile, I ended up. I suppose this is why one of prison fellowship programs called Extraordinary Lives is so important. Again, another thing that's important to me, because it tries to drop down that generational curse of Dad was inside and now I'm inside, and I guess my son will do the same. Because the first Bible study that I held in Durrangile was with just one guy who was asking questions. He asked, "What are you reading?" And I said, "I'm reading the Bible." He said, "What's that about?" And that was basically an invitation to tell him. And so I started talking to this guy about the Lord while all the other guys are smoking and playing Uno. And anyhow, this guy sits down at the end of my bed, and we're going through scriptures and things like that. And you've got to, I'll just paint the picture of this guy. He's 19 years old. He's a roughhead. He's got tattoos all up around his neck, right? Just the swallows and all the rest of it. And his body's covered in tats at 19. Now, I don't know if his dad was inside or not, but it looks like he was from his conversations. So he would be a second or third generation inmate. And I felt very sad about that. And then he asked me once, after we'd done a series of these Bible studies and we'd done some prayer and all that sort of stuff and gone through quite a few things, he asked me once what a born-again Christian was like. And I told him about the peace and the joy the Lord gives you when he comes into your heart. And he was telling his girlfriend when he was on the phone just a little while after that, he said, I think I'm becoming a born-again Christian. Now, becoming a born-again Christian doesn't always stop you from going inside. However, I don't know what happened to him, but had he became one, that might have ended that generational issue, inmate issue, because the Lord does wonderful things. He changes all sorts of hearts. And so when people are walking a road of faith, like prison's an interesting place because you've got this time that you never had before, this space, and you've got time to think, and you've got time to dwell on your past efforts and dwell on your future. And a lot of people do. You know, quite often we don't give them credit enough for the thoughts that they have, and so it's interesting. And when you're on a faith journey, the faith journey doesn't stop just because you got out of prison. However, it may stop because you've got nowhere to go. And just like that 19-year-old I was talking about, you're covered in tats, you walk into a church, you don't know anybody, everybody looks at you, Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Jones, Mr. Thompson down the front there. He's having a bit of a look and going, who's this young, strange-looking fellow? You know, all those sorts of things, and you think, oh, I don't think I'm welcome here. And you know, when you sit down on a pew, and you know, Mrs. Kafoops moves her bag up a little bit and says, "Come on, kids, just up here a little bit further." So, and that doesn't always happen because not every inmate is covered in tattoos. But the thing is that the fact is that there is this phobia that they develop. And I remember a guy that I picked up outside Port Phillip Prison probably about 10 years ago. And when he was going to his first church outside, and he was a Christian as well, and when he was going to his first church outside, he walked up to that door more than once and he just had to go home. And for the week he'd kick himself for not having the guts to go in. And so a church is vital. It's just part of the community, and prison fellowship need churches around, just like like an arm on a body. And because it's all right for prison fellowship, talking to prisoners and writing letters and all that sort of stuff, but there's nothing like that personal, loving care of a church, the nurturing that you get, the discipleship comes from a church. And so we need these churches as extensions of prison fellowship, and you know, have great relationships with them if we can. And so you can't do without a church if you're trying to get an inmate to change. I think with inmates there's some training that could be done too. And prison fellowship they're not reluctant to train, and they're looking forward to having churches come on board, because you know, Christians like to have a loving heart and all that sort of stuff, but sometimes we draw a line at where that love goes and to whom it goes, and sometimes we're just a little bit short of the mercy that we ourselves received, and so. And that's really not a fault, that's just a lack of understanding sometimes. So once the training happens in a church, these people that were reluctant, once they understand that anyone can find themselves in prison. You know, it's not necessarily that they're a bad person. We don't know what's gone on in their life formerly. And lots of people have had terrible upbringings and things like that. So a whole door opens once you get the training, and a whole new sense of love can actually happen to people when they understand, because these are, inmates are the they're the lock them up and throw away the key type of ministry, and that's why prison fellowship is so important, because it's this ministry that deals with people the rest of the world don't want. There are risks with anybody that comes into your organisation. For a start, you could have somebody that brings the family in and they're all perfect for 6 weeks, and then you hear about them backstabbing the pastor and sowing discord through the brethren. Now that's a risk, but that's a subtle risk. It's a risk you don't know about when it comes into your church. But with an inmate, well, you know that risk. You know that it could be a risk. But not all inmates present a risk when they come to church. They just want to be loved. They just want to be welcomed. And if you can do that, you'll get over 80% of the problem. That's my perspective. That's my experience. And I would recommend that you just go the way of love, the way that Jesus Christ might go, because he poured his love into people. And love seems to overcome many issues, and lots of trouble just melts in the face of love. And it's the same with inmates too, because a lot of the time they haven't had the encouragement, they haven't had the love, and there are figures that say that that create the background of a lot of inmates, which was less than substantial. So, I would say love would overcome a lot of that, but that doesn't mean you remain unaware of your risk. So, when people come out of prison, it's great having a church, and it's really important having a church. It's a significant part of an inmate's, not just their spiritual life, but how they operate and function in society. Because church is full of people that function and actually some that don't quite function. But T24 is a specific program, and what it is, it's where one of PF's volunteers, they will go and pick someone up from prison, drop them off where they need to go, sort them out with a kit, and but it also means that if necessary, they will meet up at periods over the next 24 months, and just have a coffee with some of these people and just have a chat, because quite often the roadblocks for an inmate, they might be big for an inmate, but quite small for someone who's settled in society, quite small for the typical Christian that has got his life together or her life together. And so it's just a simple answer to a question, a coffee, a croissant, and an hour could fix the next couple of weeks. And so that's another important thing where people can donate their time. They can pray for that, and they can really get involved with that type of ministry. So, look, when I was in prison, as I said, that was my first encounter with prison fellowship. And if you're walking a spiritual life, even if you're not, prison fellowship is so important. As you're coming through prison, it was important in my life. It was important when I was up in Durrangole and meeting with Ted O'Brien, and just having that consolation on a Friday with Ted. A cuppa, we'd have a cuppa and we'd have a Bible study, and getting out and then being able to pour back some of the love that I got from prison fellowship, and being able to pour that back into the community on behalf of prison fellowship is so rewarding. And I've done quite a few things with prison fellowship, and every one of them has been a reward. It's been a benefit, because I've actually learned, one of the good things is I've learned more about the inmate. And prior to going to prison, I judged inmates like the rest of society did. And I'd had a couple of mates that had been in prison, but I still judged them in that would never be me. And then I find myself in prison, and so I learned a bit about them in there, but actually coming to Prison Fellowship and having a look at all the research they have done and all the work that they have done on these inmates and on prison and why people go to prison, it's that helped me process things in my life as I went through. So it was really, I suppose cathartic might be a word to be able to work on that. And I would just, I can't see myself retiring from Prison Fellowship. It's just such a valuable organisation to a sector of community that society would prefer to forget. But thank you for all the supporters, to all the supporters, and for all the support. Jesus said some fantastic things in the Bible. And he said, "Come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And there are people out of prison that need that rest, that need to come to Christ. There are people in prison that have heavy burdens, and some of their burdens might be haunting things from their past. And what the good news of the gospel can do is bring that out. It can free you up once you give your heart to Christ, and that Holy Spirit starts working in your heart. He can get all this rubbish out of your heart. He can bring forgiveness and understanding of why you are where you are and where you can be. And the good news can put someone who has been in the lowest of the low and put them up in society. They can put them up in the highest of the high, because the good news of Jesus Christ is the gospel, and it's not just a bunch of words. I suppose it's just a whole lifestyle, based on the Holy Spirit.